Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, I wanted to talk about this comment again that Chris Ballard made on his comments at this presser the other day but from the Combine. So in the end of the year presser, Chris Ballard said that there will be some competition at the quarterback position. Their plan is to try to push Anthony Richardson to try to be the best that he can be. And there's that, right? So on top of everything else that was said at the presser at the Combine, Ballard made it an emphasis to say it again. It's not just going to be QB competition. They want to have open QB competition. So apparently they're in a situation where he stated that all avenues are open to trying to find a quarterback that will push Anthony Richardson to the edge and try to see who will win the starting job. So with that being said, before I even get into the arguments of why I think this is total BS, first things first I will say is, why on God's green earth are you trying to have another QB? And I'm not even going to call it QB competition. I'm going to call it a QB controversy, because that's technically what you're trying to do here. Because if you bring in a quarterback that realistically can beat Anthony Richardson out and will prove to everyone that he is miles above what Anthony Richardson is right now, and you bring that person in, and now you're in a situation where now you still are wondering if the quarterback that you brought in is going to be the long-term solution to your problem, because again, the Indianapolis Colts are in a situation where they need to figure out long-term who their quarterback is going to be. There's still question marks on if it'll be Anthony Richardson, but if you bring in another quarterback and that quarterback's not young and that quarterback is not miles ahead of Anthony Richardson, then ultimately what is the point in bringing in competition to openly try and beat out Anthony Richardson? Because they say that they want to try to, get Anthony Richardson to play better. First of all, if you need to bring in another quarterback to spark a fire in that quarterback to prove that his job's not safe, then that goes on the coaching and that goes on ownership for not sitting that kid down and making him realize, you've got to earn this. You've got to earn this. We're not going to bring in another quarterback on a lot of money to try and convince you of that, but we're going to tell you that, and we're going to make sure you know that. So that's already on the fault of Ballard and Steichen for allowing that to be that way. And so here's the reason why I don't think that there's going to be an actual competition per se, like an actual open QB competition. I don't think they're actually doing that. I said before, I think that they're going to get a young quarterback that is definitely not ever going to hit or if they've hit a ceiling yet, it's already been hit and it's not very high. So and to just be there to back up Anthony Richardson, just to be that guy to try to make sure if Anthony Richardson is god awful, then you have an option to go back on somebody else. That's my feeling on it. Because there's a reason why I feel like that. So, first of all, there aren't a lot of options. I know a lot of people are mentioning Sam Darnold. The problem is that for Sam Darnold, you're probably going to pay quite a bit of money for Sam Darnold because he is only 28 years old. He did come off of a career year. I don't know how I feel about him leading this Indianapolis Colts team. I know he had some pretty darn good numbers last year with Minnesota. I'm wondering if that's on the basis of him or if that's anything else. But again, last year, played in all 17 games, had 35 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, a 102 passer rating, threw for over 4,000 yards. So, all in all, again, a very good year from Sam Darnold. The problem that you have is that I don't know if you're going to get him for cheap. If you could get him for very cheap, then I get it. But I don't think you're going to get him for under $10 million. I don't think you're going to get him for under $10 million. They might. I don't know how, but they might. But that would be very difficult for me to see. Justin Fields, I know, was one that people have definitely been stamping at the ground for. That's one of the only ones that really makes sense if you're actually trying to bring in a quarterback that's not going to blow up the bank and is going to actually be able to run the system that Steichen has. So I get that one. But outside of that, there's not a lot more of these that makes you go, wow, we can definitely do something with that. Daniel Jones is another one whose name gets brought up. But, I mean, are we being serious here? Daniel Jones? Really? There's not a lot of other options. There's not a lot of younger quarterbacks that are capable of doing or of taking this team, because ultimately, if you're going to bring in QB competition to have open competition with these people, then you need to get a quarterback that is going to transcend this team. And Sam Darnold could be one of them. Justin Fields, I think, could be one of them. I know people mentioned Jameis Winston's name in here. Guys, I'll be honest, I don't like Jameis Winston for this. I know a lot of people keep bringing it up, but guys, he played in 12 games and he had 13 passing touchdowns and 12 interceptions. And I'm pretty sure he had multiple pick sixes. So I know his numbers in some ways are a little bit better than Richardson's, but Winston is not a world changer for us. Again, if you want to have him as a backup to Anthony Richardson, just in case something happens, then I'm fine with that. But as far as having an actual quarterback competition, there's really only about two names that you can bring up in which the Indianapolis Colts are actually going to have a real open QB competition room with. And one I think might cost too much, and one might actually go into another point, which I'm going to make here in a second. They did say they are completely open to everything. So trades, I don't know what in the hell you would trade to bring it in, but you could do that. And then there's also the draft. Again, I don't know if there's a lot of late round quarterback options that I'd be fine with. I've heard people, I've argued with people literally all damn day of 2 weeks or 3 weeks back talking about how if Ballard used a first round draft pick on a quarterback, then ultimately that would be the biggest downfall in the history of downfalls when it comes to Chris Ballard, because it just shows exactly how he feels about Anthony Richardson. And Anthony Richardson should have no faith in the Colts if that's the case. So miss me with that, right? And it goes into the other thing again, how much money and resources are you willing to spend to try and prove a point? And the point is that you still need Anthony Richardson to work out as quarterback. The problem I have is people are telling me, if you can somehow find a quarterback that is going to be better than Anthony Richardson, right now, it doesn't matter if they've been in the league for a few years or if they're coming out of the draft, that should ultimately only matter if they're winning football games, right? So all of a sudden, Chris Ballard's job is saved if somehow, some way, he finds a quarterback in a really thin NFL free agent class and in a really thin draft class this year, too. And all of a sudden, if somehow, some way he finds one, that means all of a sudden Ballard's job should be saved. It shouldn't be. And second of all, if you are willing to go that far to try to prove that Anthony Richardson was not the one, then why in the world did you possibly draft him in 2023 if you weren't going to give this kid a shot? Ballard even said it in the presser at the combine that said, we drafted him knowing that it was going to take some time. It's been 2 years, and in the first year, he was hurt for the majority of it, so that one didn't count. And then this year, he had to deal with injuries. He had to deal with the backlash of getting benched, all of these things. So he has spent more of his first 2 seasons on the sideline than what he has on the field, right? And his team hasn't helped him out. His coaches haven't helped him out, albeit he hasn't helped himself out. But his team has not helped him. And you want me to sit here and try to be reasonable in the sense that you want me to think that they're going to actually bring in some real competition to try and beat out Anthony Richardson? No, because ultimately you drafted this guy 4th overall. You have to have your eggs in that basket. You have to have, if Anthony Richardson fails, let him fail on his own accord. Don't bring in another quarterback that may or may not be the answer for you in the future and allow Anthony Richardson to spend the remainder of his rookie contract on the bench, not learning anything, not getting better, and then leave when his rookie contract is up. And then after that's all said and done, somebody will pay him and he'll go where he has a chance to win a starting spot, someone that actually believes in him, and someone that will actually do it. As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you. There's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. I think a lot of people are forgetting the fact that, sure, like, I want Anthony Richardson to feel like his seat is always on fire. Of course, I always want my quarterback to know that, you know, he has to go earn his job. I get that. But at the same time, there's two things that also can happen. You don't want your quarterback to automatically assume that at all times his seat is always on fire, because when he makes mistakes, that's when it gets worse, because they lose confidence in themselves if they feel like every mistake they make is a one step closer to them getting thrown into QB purgatory, right? And then you also don't want him to be sitting where, again, the confidence goes away, and not just his confidence in himself, but his confidence in the fan base, his confidence in the team, his confidence in the organization. I think people are starting to get into a situation where they feel like the Indianapolis Colts should not just do a QB competition thing, but open competition and go all in, like throw every chip you have at somebody, even like a Stafford, and get somebody that will, you know, be ahead of Richardson again. And why? Why would we want Anthony Richardson, who's trying to improve? And the only way that this kid can get better with his mechanics and the way he plays is by getting actual snaps. And if you're going to just keep benching him, then there's no point. There's no point in having drafted Anthony Richardson if you're going to just continue to try to find somebody that might take his spot. If someone like Zach Wilson or Taylor Heineke or some BS player like that, like Mac Jones or some crap, takes his spot, then you know Anthony Richardson ain't worth a damn. That's fine. But if you're just going to try to find a really good player to truly be the starter over Richardson, then it makes no difference. And again, you can say whatever you want about the competition. Guys, if they got Sam Darnold, if they got Justin Fields, if they got Matt Stafford of all freaking people, right? There is no way that Anthony Richardson beats out these guys. They really don't. And the reason why I know that is because even if Anthony Richardson could go out this year and do amazing things, they're going to know ahead of time. They're going to know ahead of time who's the starter. And if Justin Fields or Sam Darnold gets in here, then you have a legit problem where you may not see Anthony Richardson start the year. And then what does that do? All this change of trying to make him better, it's worthless. It's worthless, him sitting on the bench. Again, I know that the Indianapolis Colts are trying to right the wrongs of what they did last year. There was a lot of things that they did wrong last year. But getting another quarterback, another retread quarterback, and not even a retread quarterback, a quarterback that might be younger, that could potentially have a few years left in them at the end of this, to come in here and try to take over the quarterback position of the guy that you're trying to get experience, it just doesn't make sense. So, listen, I know I went on a rant. But it's how I feel. I'm sick and tired of these arguments here. I'm pissed off that Ballard's even saying this. I really am. I'm pissed off about it. Because, like, I get it. Anthony Richardson hasn't been good. I totally get that. He hasn't been good. He hasn't displayed professionalism. He hasn't done all these things. Okay? But he's working to try to get better at it. He's 22 years old. He's 22. And he's a young player who has come into this league with far less experience than any other quarterback before him. And he's working on his mechanics. He's working with the right kind of people. He's got to be better in how he handles things on the field. And I think he took a step forward in that at the end of the year. But I think if they do this and they go all in on it, then they are doing a disservice to Anthony Richardson, not a good to Anthony Richardson. Any other position, go put competition out there. You don't need QB competition because when that starts happening, you get QB controversies. The quarterback position is completely different than every other position in football. It's more different than every other position in sports. Quarterbacks are the guy. And when you get told you may not be the guy, it does a lot of damage to that person's psyche. It really does. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts on if you really think there's a QB competition in Indy. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.